evening and welcome to the April 26th, 2021 meeting of the Wakefield Town Council. I'm calling this meeting to order. Attendance for town councilors. At the moment, we have 5 members present. Mr. Paul Donaco and Mr. Peter May are not present at the moment. If I could have the Pledge of Allegiance, Ryan, the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And item number 4, public engagement. I see, I'm certainly willing to speak. Ms. Cook, I see you on the Zoom. You certainly can say for 3 minutes something similar to what the letter was, or you can ask me to report what you had requested.
I can just read it.
Oh, sure.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank
if
you.
you just have, as long as it's under 3 minutes, you're good.
I have no problem with that.
And if you could please identify yourself and give us your address.
Sure. It's Teresa Cook, 38 Prospect Street, Wakefield.
Great.
Counselors, you have received an email regarding a preliminary proposal at the Northeast Metropolitan Vocational School Site project. In the attachment to the email that you received, you will read details of the requested proposal from parents of students in Wakefield. We are looking for your support and partnership in advocating for including a pool on the Northeast Metropolitan Vocational School site as part of their design component for the new school. Thank you.
Great, Teresa, thank you so much. I think that's something that a lot of us have mentioned in the past, and with the VOC being built, seems like it would be a wonderful addition. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.
I need a motion, please. And oh, I'm sorry, Sherry, is there anyone else for public participation?
No, no one else.
Excellent, thanks. Item number 5, an approval of the minutes. I need a motion and a second to approve the April 12th, 2021 council minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Jonathan,
Second.
seconded by Ed. Roll call vote. Julie,
Yes.
Jonathan,
Yes.
Ed,
Aye.
Irene,
Yes.
myself, yes. Thank you. So before I get to hazard mitigation plan, Joe, if you could wait a moment, is that Bob Burnett? Excellent.
Yes, it is.
I'm going to
Sorry about
ask,
the
great. I'm going to ask that we move item number 11, Blatz Field, the expansion of the naming of Blatz Field to Blatz Park, Megan Burnett Field, up to the next item we discuss. And I'll let Bob kick this off, and then Julie can make a comment, but this is really an absolutely wonderful project in full agreement with members of the Blatz family that are still here in Wakefield. So Bob, if you could just talk a little bit about the process.
Yeah, let's see. I want to try to clarify my picture here. Because I've got something, we had some meeting, and anyways, sorry about this.
That's okay.
It's anyhow, yeah, it was kind of a long process. I don't have a lot. It's something that has been, we started, a long time, a few years ago, and the people who were helping us out, they recommended the field, working on the field, because Megan, that was something that Megan had always talked about. And, she didn't understand why we had so much space. It was such a good place for a field, why it wasn't such a good field, why it was kind of run down. And she didn't know about the old Blatz Field. And when I was a kid, Blatz Field was on Farm Street in front of the Woodville School, where the parking lot is now between the two places. And it was a great school. I had field envy. I always wanted to play there, but I never got to. I was in the wrong league. So anyhow, I didn't notice that I just noticed that it was gone. I didn't realize when. And, obviously it was when the school was being built and they needed, a laid down area, whatever, construction was going on. And they had and they needed a parking area. So it was when my kids became, my kids started playing softball, that's when I learned that field had the name Blatz. And I thought it was kind of a sorry excuse for the field. I mean nothing bad against anybody who was involved with putting it there, because maybe, that was the best we could do at the time. I don't know. But I just feel, and then anyhow, fast forward when I finally tracked down the grandson of Marty Blatz, Billy Texera, and we were talking about it, and it was clear that it was always it was something that hurt their family very much. That it was, it had been a nice field, and they were proud of that, and then it just kind of went away. And they were always, he referred to his grandmother and his mother always, being very hurt by that. And he thought that this was an excellent way to kind of reestablish it. And he loved, the idea. He thought that it was great having, Megan and his grandfather, because they're both kind of the same in that they like to, they were all about helping kids. Marty was, that's all that I know about Marty, was that he was big in, he was instrumental in starting Little League in Wakefield, and he was all about the kids, whatever, he was always doing for the kids. He was loved, everybody who knew him thought he was great. Anyways, and then, a generation later, it's like, Megan was kind of like walking in his footsteps. So, anyhow, that's, I'm not good at speaking. I can write things. But
I think you were perfect. I think that what's so important is we're recognizing both a coach and a player who loved softball, who loved Wakefield. And Julie, did you want to say a few things? You and I have sat in Blatz Field when it was not great.
It was not great. And
Hoping someone would break an ankle.
well, and Bob, you're being really modest. I mean, the Megan Burnett Foundation and all of the many of the softball parents, and actually a lot of the softball players, fought very hard to get that done. And it was your persistence that let us do it. I just came from the high school softball parents meeting 15 minutes ago, and they're going to field 3 teams this year. And the seniors will use that beautiful new field really for the first time. So thank you. I think you summed it up. I appreciate that you were able to connect with Marty Blatz's family and find a solution that lets us honor them both. And so I really thank you for taking that extra step as well. And I fully support this. I do not call it a renaming. I call it an expanded naming.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And just for, FYI, the name is actually, Billy suggested the name. So.
Oh, great. That's great.
It'll be Blatz Park, Megan Burnett Field. And I think, Bob, you didn't mention it, but you'll also be putting memorial plaques on the dugouts to both.
Oh, right. Yeah. And I talked to Billy about that a little bit. He read some things that they had received after his grandfather had passed. And one of them was the dedication, I think. I think it had to do with the dedication of the original Blatz Field. And there was some very nice things. So I'll be, getting in touch with him. We'll be talking. And what I hope to do, what I, been talking with other members of the foundation, we'd hope to have like a, be able to have a bronze plaque in each dugout, kind of like Cooperstown.
Yeah.
And with a little blurb about each one. And I was thinking, like, right now, you get people who know Megan, but people don't know Marty. So it'll be a good opportunity to get his name back where it belongs.
I feel like it brings some history back in. It brings us
Yeah.
a new generation become more familiar with both of them. So that's great.
Yep.
And I guess hopefully we'll have the rededication on softball senior day. So I will see you there.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Steve, do we need a vote for this?
Yes, I think you should have a
Okay.
vote for it. And the school committee, I believe, is also going to take this up Wednesday night, and I assume a similar wonderful vote at the same
Great.
time.
So if I could please have a vote and a second to for the renaming of Blatz Field to Blatz Park, Megan Burnett Field. Julie, would you like to make the
I
motion?
would like to make that motion.
Second?
Second.
Second, Maureen, thank you. Roll call vote, Julie,
Yes.
Jonathan,
Yes.
Ed,
Aye.
Maureen, and myself. Yes. Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you so much, Bob, for all your hard work and your grace. It really is a
Oh, thank you.
wonderful
you.
thing to do.
You've all been very helpful and I really appreciate it. And I hope, no, never mind.
Thanks,
I'll
Bob.
see
We
you
will
at the
see you
field.
there. Yes, we
Yeah.
will.
Absolutely.
I think I went off of public participation a tiny bit too quickly. We have Marie. Marie, are you still on?
I
Yeah,
am.
Marie
Can you
raised
hear
it.
me?
Oh, right there. I'm sorry. You're
Yeah.
right in front of me. Zoom, I
Thank
sometimes
you.
lose people. Marie, if you could just identify yourself and say where you live.
Sure. I'm Marie Ray, 25 Montclair Avenue, obviously in Wakefield, and I am here as the co-chair of the Commission on Disability Issues. In particular to Mr. Dombrowski, thank you for reaching out, and I'm sorry that I wasn't able to respond to you earlier today. So that's the purpose of my joining this evening. At your April 12th meeting, there appeared to be some confusion over the appointments for the commission. There were two individuals that were put forth. I was a reappointment, and we had another participant, another resume, a Janice Mirabasi. And it appeared the confusion was a misunderstanding as to the limit of the number of members that the commission can have. In my email, I sent to you a couple of links. There was the Wakefield Town Code, which references the Commission on Disability Issues. And then it doesn't say much. It then references you to the Mass General Law. And in the Mass General Law is where it specifically states that a commission can have no fewer than 5 members and no greater than 13 members. So I guess maybe it's our confusion that we were under the impression that we could have up to 13 members, and we've been working towards that goal. So when Mrs. Mirabasi wasn't selected, we were rather confused by that. So that's why I wanted to reach out. It is our intention, we would like to be able to have at least 13 members. And I know Mr. Dombrowski asked, why is that? One is because when we saw Mrs. Mirabasi's resume, we were very impressed, and we think that she would be an excellent addition to the council. If you also look at that Mass General Code, you'll see that, the members should be diverse. We should have a representative from someone that has been a town representative, that someone that's been elected from the town should be on our board. While we do have some individuals with disabilities themselves, we certainly should have more. We'd like to reach out to the Youth Council and have a representative from the Youth Council on the board. Part of it is we got a very slow start. When I first came on board, I came on board and then the chair and the co-chair left. So we took us a couple of months to figure out how we wanted to move forward. And I think we need to get, I don't think a lot of people know that this commission exists. And so that's pretty much our mission right now. Last year, we had reserved the Savings Bank Theater to do a film presentation of Intelligent Lives, which was going to be our way to bring in the community and say, hi, here we are. And we never got the opportunity to do that. So again, I think it's been a slow start for us getting our name out there and getting more people. So right now we have 8 members. Many of us work full time. In order for us to be able to do any of the things we want to do, we need hands, we need people, we need some of us represented on other boards to represent those with disabilities. We need to be out in the community. And it's, the more hands we have, the easier it will make that for us.
Thank you, Marie. I think for tonight's meeting, there's a request to add an additional voting member, but maybe if you do want to increase with more specificity, at some point you can come before the board with a kind of a more detailed plan on that,
Okay.
that we can discuss. But we'll be hitting that when we get to item number 9. So thank you so much for sharing your
Thank
thoughts.
you for your time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Joe Conway, thank you for being very patient. Item number 6, the hazard mitigation plan, I am tossing over to Joe.
Sure. So, thank you, Madam Chair. Just for the record, Joseph Conway, Public Works Director. So what I come before everyone this evening is short and sweet. Basically, going to ask for a vote to reaffirm approval of the hazard mitigation plan. As you may remember, a draft of this plan was presented by the Department of Public Works and our consultant Beta Group back in June 19. Since the last briefing we gave the council, we submitted the plan to MEMA and FEMA. They provided some comment back to us and we worked closely with our consultant. We had to address a couple of housekeeping questions from FEMA. Some of the things really procedural, but more point of order, clarifying some timelines, updating some development information, and kind of being a little bit more specific. One of the things that they asked us to do was we had mentioned some funding sources being local, assuming that they would understand that that was the general fund of the town. They asked us to call that in the enterprises out specifically. So the final version that was included in your packets is substantially the same plan. The foundation of it, the guts to the plan and the details have not changed whatsoever. So what I come before you tonight is seeking an endorsement of the final HMP plan as approved by FEMA. That way Public Works and the town can start to apply for some of the federal grant programs.
Awesome. Joe, thank you so much. Do any counselors have any questions for Joe on this? We had a much more in-depth presentation a few meetings ago. Jonathan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Conway, for giving us the summary and continuing to work on this. I just had one question in sort of a restatement of a request that I think I had made back in 2019 when we first reviewed this. Can you give us a status update on any projects that have gone forward on the mitigation plan since then? And certainly given that part of us accepting this tonight is to allow us to apply for grants going forward. I guess my request for the future would be if we could kind of calendar in updates to the council on an annual basis based on sort of what we've kind of ticked off in terms of the mitigation plan going forward.
Absolutely. We're always excited to come before the council and talk about grant opportunities that we have the chance to competitively seek out and get awarded. So as they start, coming to fruition, we'll absolutely update you along the way.
Anything specific that we've been able to move forward with on the plan since 19 or?
So a couple of the things, believe it or not, that we mentioned, I could think of one. So the generator at Town Hall was mentioned in the plan, but because of the way that the FEMA and CARES, dynamic came with, kind of reassuring that the town can still operate if we couldn't operate in Town Hall, we were actually able to fund that project from a different source. Some of the things we'll be looking at is to make any building where we need to have emergency generation have the capacity to do so. One of the other things that we mentioned in it, certainly there's a lot about stormwater mitigation and things like that. I'm sure as the council is aware, our engineering group is all over that and they're applying for every opportunity that they can. By adopting this, this will just give us one more tool in the toolbox to seek out funding for the town of Wakefield.
Great. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. That was short and sweet, Joe. You get a gold star for tonight's meeting. Can I please have a motion and a second to reaffirm the approval of adopt the hazard mitigation plan? So moved by Ed. Seconded by Julie. Roll call vote. Julie.
Yes.
Madam
Jonathan.
Chair, sorry,
Yes.
just a quick question. Is the certificate of adoption in the packet what we're voting on now? Or is that a separate vote?
Oh, Jonathan, that's an excellent question. Tom, do we have to read adopt the certificate of adoption or just a vote on the hazard mitigation plan?
I don't have your package, so is this a document that has to be signed by you as chair?
I think that's what it says. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that I had to read this. So I think I have to read it too. It's one of the whereas documents.
Yeah, why don't you do that, please?
Okay, here we go. Let me step back. Certificate of
And
adoption.
Madam Chair, just before you read it, the part of the reason I ask is there's a reference in it to the town of Braintree, that if that is what we're voting on, I just want to make sure we correct that.
Well, I mean, we like Braintree too, so yes, I will make sure. I'll read Wakefield. Certificate of Adoption, Town Council, a resolution adopting the Town of Wakefield Hazard Mitigation Plan 2021 update, I think. Whereas the Town of Wakefield established a committee to prepare the Town of Wakefield Hazard Mitigation Plan 2021. Whereas the Town of Wakefield Hazard Mitigation Plan 2021 contains several potential future projects to mitigate potential impacts from natural hazards in the Town of Wakefield. And whereas duly noticed public meetings were held by the local hazard mitigation planning team on February 28th, 2019, March 14th, 2019. And whereas the Town of Wakefield authorizes responsible departments and or agencies to execute the responsibilities demonstrated in the plan. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Town of Wakefield Town Council adopts the Town of Wakefield Hazard Mitigation Plan 2021 in accordance with MGL 40 Section 4 or the charter and bylaws of the Town of Wakefield, adopted and signed by the chair of the Town Council this 26th day of April 2021. So if we can have a motion and a second to adopt what I just read in with regard to hazard mitigation.
Moved.
So moved by Ed,
Seconded.
seconded by Jonathan. Roll call vote. Julie,
Yes.
Jonathan,
Yes.
Ed,
Aye.
Maureen,
Yes.
and myself. Excellent. Thank you so much, Director Conway. And do we get to release you? Yeah. I don't think you kinda
Yes,
did.
I believe I'm going to be leaving.
Good. Well, enjoy your night and thanks so much, Joe.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Item number 7, Steve, I'm going to send this to you, the financial update.
Sure, thank you. If Ryan, if you could put the thank you. Thank you very much. So at the last meeting, I think it was Councilor Chines requested kind of a little update. You know, we've gone through all our budgets and I want to thank the Town Council. You've worked very, very hard in going through these, and Finance Committee. And so let's see how it all came together, how we were in the beginning of the year. And you note it's final in quotations. If you go back one, please, Ryan, because there are still items in the budget that we will not know until August and later in the year. So final in quotations, because I think these budgets are always living and changing, and we try to be as close as we can. But this is very similar to what we talked about the tri-board meeting and through our kind of pre-budget previews back in January. So next slide, please. I always like to talk about our current reserves because these are something that are very important, and, you know, thank God we had them during the COVID pandemic, because we did have some loss in revenue. So our stabilization fund, and think of that as our CD. We have to, you know, get a special vote of town meeting, a 2/3 vote to use that, is $3 million, and that is certainly within policy. SPED stabilization fund, and this was established a number of years ago to help in the event that we had any extra costs in special education. And I will tell you that this fiscal year, we did, you know, because of outplacements of students and what have you. And we'll be dipping into that in the amount of $230,000 at the May town meeting. So I'm happy that we have that, because that's for that purpose. Free cash is about $4.5 million. That's where we ended up after the November town meeting. Our reserve fund is $300,000. OPEB is at 18 million, and our water and sewer reserve, we're at 1.8 million. OPEB, as the Town Council knows, is money for other post-employment benefits. It's really very, very important to cover the potential cost of retirees' health insurance. And the fact that we are funding that OPEB account way ahead of a lot of our contemporary communities really helps in our bond rating. Next slide, please. So as I said, we're well within our policy of all these items, free cash, 2 to 8% of our operating revenue. So we're pretty well there. We're at the higher level, but minimum of 2 million, we have 4.5 million. Stabilization, we are at 3%. Think about our $100 million budget, so we're pretty good there. Reserve, we probably were a little bit under that, so we're going to move the reserve fund up next fiscal year to 400,000. Thank you for the council on that vote. And of course, we have the sped reserve. Next slide, please. So one thing that we do when I do with the forecasting committee is to really look at where our reserves are going to go over the next few years. And this is really a worst case scenario. This is a scenario that we played out with the forecasting subcommittee on the finance committee. And this states that we get no extra income in a year and no department return of money. As you know, most of the departments return money. So if that were to happen, I think we would close out fiscal year 21 at around 5 million. Then we would see a dip if, because we're still thinking we're coming out of the pandemic, and our reserves would go down before they go back up. I will tell you, I feel that we are going to be in a much better position here than this worst case scenario shows. Because first of all, income is coming in a little bit higher than we thought. We are seeing returns from some of the departments. We will see returns. So I see that fiscal year 21 in the probably in the $6 million range, and then going forward from there. So I am very pleased with that account. Next slide, please. So what do we know when we set the budget? As I said before, we know the tax levy. We know we can take the previous year tax levy, multiply that by 2.5% and add it. So we know that'll be the tax levy for fiscal year 22. State aid is coming in at this point at a net of $11.1 million. I had predicted 11.3 million in January, so I'm not very happy being off a little bit. And I will say basically that is because the Chapter 70 funding came in for Wakefield at 1.5% more than last fiscal year, which is a little bit less than we had anticipated. You will note when we had the state delegation in at our last meeting, they did talk about a potential $40 million Chapter 70 fund that may get rolled out later on in the year. If that happens, we should see a little bit more there. And that'll be based upon student population. The governor and the state legislature based Chapter 70 for this fiscal year on last year's in-person students. And we do know there was an outflow of students. People homeschooled, they went to private schools, they went to Catholic schools, what have you, because they wanted to have either wanted to be all at home or wanted the in-school experience. So that number may go up a little bit. Local receipts, think of that as our car excise taxes, permit fees, local option meals, and hotel taxes. This was running around $8 million before the pandemic. We drastically cut it last year to 6.2 million. For this next fiscal year, we're coming in at 6.8 million. We're forecasting that. I will tell you, we're running this year probably around a $7 million level. So that's good. But we were very concerned with some of those other figures not coming in where we wanted, particularly hotel taxes, which are way off, dropped way down. Actually, meals tax did better than we had anticipated. Great community, great restaurants, and people did do a lot of takeout during the year, really supported the businesses. So that helped. The MLD pilot payment in lieu of tax program, that's on a agreement with the MLD. I believe this is the last, or next fiscal year is the last year. $931,000 there. I think we'll have some discussions about that going forward. Free cash, we are going to use 1.6 million in free cash to smooth out or balance the budget, really to make up for those local receipts that are still less than the 8.2 million they were before. Available funds are some other items that come in, some other permit fees that we do add there, and that's $2.5 million. Excuse me, 250,000. I wish it was $2.5 million using those. New growth is one of the big bugaboos. This is what we think we're going to get from new construction. Now, there's been a lot of new construction around town. There is certainly always a lag when we get new growth. And I would say $1.5 million of this is the power line. So if those all come in, and I always tell Victor, a lot of the pressure is on him to make sure that we meet up with that new growth. But that's a number I'm not going to get until around August or September. But I think we're feeling pretty good about that number at this point. Big question is the federal relief money. We certainly received some wonderful federal relief this fiscal year. Next fiscal year, we are going to receive, and I say some wonderful federal relief money. You will note that very little of this is used in balancing the budget. And the numbers that are being talked about are a lot more. Numbers are in the $8 million range from the federal government. I think we're using 400,000 of that for some different positions in the budget. And we'll talk about that, I think, as we go a little bit further on the slide program. So that's going to be a lot of opportunities and things for us to talk about as we go forward. So I'm looking at the total estimated revenue at a little about $102,578,850. Next slide, please. So the budgets, where are these expenses going? I've broken these down into the categories that are in the recommendation book. So general government, it covers kind of think of that as the town hall departments. And these were all voted on by the town council and the finance committee, $2.5 million. Protection of persons and property, police, fire, building department, things like that. Almost $13 million. Human services, Board of Health, Council on Aging, almost $1 million, 903,000. DPW for Joe that we just had here. Wakefield Public Schools, this is the tax levy portion of 458,200. Unclassified, those are some of those other items in your budget there. Some of the insurances, streetlights, historical commission, things like that. Vocational school, $1.9 million. This is for the Voc up the hill from the high school, and also Essex Tech and the Minuteman Regional. Library, 1.7 million. So our budgets add up to $93,105,304. Next slide, please. Then we go to some of our articles and offsets. You may remember in the fiscal year 2021, we dropped capital to about $1 million. One of our priorities going into this budget this year was to bring capital back up to the $2 million level, and we did. But I will note that there's still $1 million in capital that did not get spent, so we haven't caught that million up. Might be something we'll think about going forward when the federal money comes in. Debt service, $5 million. This includes the Galvin School, the Prop 2.5 Galvin School override, which is about 2.5 million of that. The 2.6 is part of our normal debt service, which covers the public safety building. It covers the Walton School. It covers the sports fields, covers some drainage projects. It covers all of those wonderful things, the road bond program, all those wonderful things that we've talked about and we've been able to do. Eminent domain, which is that $1 for eminent domain takings for maybe taking a corner easement or something like that, the one that Tom Mullen never lets me use. So that dollar always gets returned. Refuse, which is the trash, refuse, and recycling, $2.2 million. The two property assessment ones, we talked about this during the budget process as well. 38,000 for real property assessments being a revaluation year, and personal property assessments of 45,000. These won't be done for a number of years after this year. These numbers used to be in the assessor's budget. We thought it better to put it in an article. Overlay, which is the money that we say we may not collect, or that we put aside from people that are looking for abatements. State assessments, this is what the state charges us for different items. And I always say that, the state tells you what they're going to give you. And then on page 2 of the cherry sheet, they tell you they're going to take away money for the MBTA, which is about $612,000 a year to the town of Wakefield, and for charter school tuition, which is about $1.2 million. So those are the big items there. So our total articles and offsets are almost $12 million. Next slide, please. So I have my budgets and articles, and they total 105, $20,310. We back out the Galvin Middle School of about 2.5, and we come up with a total of 102, 539, 162. I will tell you that when we met in January, we hadn't done all the budgets yet. I didn't have them in. I anticipated that number being at 102,225,000. So I was 0.3% off. Not bad. And it was the vocational school increase that killed me. I think we had 18 more kids at the Voc, and I shouldn't say it that way, but that was an extra $300,000 in the budget that I hadn't counted on. Next slide, please. So we look at revenue, less expenses, and for our exercises here, we really are balanced, which is a good thing because we have to be balanced, although we really won't know that until all the numbers come in and we have our November town meeting. So next slide, please, Ryan. So there always are some budget uncertainties. State aid, there is a chance of getting more in Chapter 70. There's also a chance of 9C cuts. I don't think that will happen. It was great that the state delegation and both the House and the Senate voted a local aid resolution, which means that I know what our Chapter 70 and our unrestricted aid is going to be at this point in time. Makes very easy, much easier for budgeting. Local receipts are running ahead of predictions. We have this year coming in at 6.8, our next fiscal year 6.8. I'm hoping that they come over. That's a really good thing right now. If the hotels open up, it'll really be much better, but I'm really pleased with that. Health insurance. Our health insurance employees, our employees right now are going through early open enrollment. And through the GIC, there are a myriad of choices that they can make. Our Human Resources Department does a great job meeting with every single employee, if they ask, and retiree, and helping them move to lower cost plans. Doctors are the same, hospitals are the same, co-pays are the same. If all your doctors are on that plan and the hospital is there, why not get a lower cost plan? The employee saves and we save. So it works out very well. School priorities. This is something I work very closely with the superintendent on. There are going to be learning losses over this fiscal year. Let's not sugarcoat it. That's going to happen. The students, as wonderful as the school department did, there were some areas where not being in class every day makes a difference. So there may be some funds that are needed for that. We will look at that. There are also a lot of government grant opportunities on top of the American Rescue Plan Act coming in. So we'll be looking at those. Snow and ice, there is no overdraft so far. I think there'll be a little bit money returned there, a couple $100,000. It is still in the month of April. We have had May snowstorms. I tell Joe we're going to let it melt from now on, but we'll see what happens. We don't count our chickens till they hatched. New growth, we won't know about that till August and September, and we are looking for a really pretty robust year there. And in the federal policy, I said that we used a little bit to offset expenses, and the town council may remember that we're using a portion of the CARES Act and the new federal money that goes through the end of CARES Act goes to the end of this calendar year, and the new federal money goes to 2024 to fund $360,000 of one-year appointments at the school department. It's kind of nice to use that for those one-year appointments, and then they can regroup after that. But we also use some money for the town hall greeters, for making the mental health clinician at the police department full-time, some other money for the full-time Board of Health nurse that we're going to split with the town of Melrose. Next slide, please. Again, school department, what will education look like in 2022? Learning loss issues, summer school, continuation of remote for some students. There may be some that will want to go remote by choice, and there may be a cost to that. We talked a little bit of the additional funds and where that's going to come from. And there's always a unknown in special education costs. School department does a great job in monitoring those. And we do have the stabilization fund for special ed, and I would be looking to replenish that most likely in November. So we have that when we need it again. I think that's been a really good savings for us to do it that way. Next slide, please. So again, to sum it up, federal policy, we'll be looking for every FEMA dollar we can get. And Tom Walsh has done a great job working with myself and Kevin into getting every nickel we can out of them. I said the CARES Act funds can be used through 12/31/2021. We got 2.4 million. I will guarantee you we will use all of that money in one way or another. And the American Rescue Plan Act funds, I'm actually doing a webinar on this tomorrow. The town of Wakefield is slated for 7.9 million. Rumor is that we are going to receive half of that sometime in the next 30 days. And this is a little bit different. This isn't that we have to spend the money and then ask for reimbursement. This is we're going to get it and then audit it to spend it on certain items. And we'll be looking, coming back to the council, whether we should use it to replace revenue loss, therefore shoring up reserves. Capital we talked about, new technology, business development, infrastructure, things like that. But all of it must be sustainable. I think where a lot of communities could run into some trouble is using non-recurring revenue for recurring costs. And that's something we're going to have to be very careful working with the town council, the finance committee, and the school committee on that. So all in all, it was actually a very pleasant budget experience this year. I think the department's head did a great job. I thank the town council. I thank the finance committee. We're going into fiscal year 22 feeling much better than I did going into fiscal year 21. And there was a lot of hard work by everybody. So just a quick update. It all came together. The town council gets to vote on this every meeting on every budget, but I think it was important. You can see how it all came together. And even though we sent the sheets out, the running tally every meeting, this kind of shows you that it did all balance. So with that being said, I'm open for any questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Steve. Any questions for Steve? Jonathan?
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Mayo, for walking through that. I requested that because I do think it's helpful to see how everything comes together. And certainly when I was on the finance committee, I almost found sort of the last meeting before town meeting to be the most useful, where we just, took everything and brought it into one place. I was wondering if you could give us your thoughts on sort of the process that you'd look to follow in terms of thinking about disposition for the American Rescue Plan Act funds. I definitely am with you that it's not something that I would want to see as a replacement for operating expenses that are recurring, because I think that just pushes financial challenges down the line, and certainly would love to see us replace some of the capital expenses that we deferred, and even think about some more sort of robust kind of legacy projects going forward. But knowing that we will need to kind of come up with a plan, how would you see that process playing out over the next few months once we get more information?
Well, what I'd like to do is, the forecasting committee and I at the FinCom have talked about this, and how does that sprinkle in. I would like to do items that we deferred, to look at that, and not only capital items that we deferred, because sometimes they do end up being more later on. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes you can get that extra year out of a truck, and big deal, the truck maybe costs the same. So I'd like to look at capital. I would like to look at, as we run out our reserves over the next number of years, I would like to see whether we should shore up some of that now with part of that fund money, because we could always pull it out later on, making up from revenue loss. Because when we do go out for some projects, particularly the high school, having some good reserves will mean, I would hope, keeping that AAA bond rating, which will mean a lower interest rate, lower costs, will actually save the taxpayers money. So I would like to make sure that we're on a good path and we're within our policy. Other than on those two things, then I would have to say that we would have to look to maybe having, I'm going to call it some sort of a meeting with the town council, some sort of to think about what are some of the priorities we'd like to do. Now, the CARES Act talks about items where it should be in infrastructure, whether that be roads or sidewalks or what have you. Business development is one of the things they're looking at. Broadband, maybe that's not a big issue here as it is out maybe in rural America. But maybe something that really helps business development is by having the town Wi-Fi expanded in the downtown area, and so people can sit out at the cafes, sit out at the library, get their coffee from what have you, and do some work. Thinking about how is work and dining and the downtown experience going to change in the next, decade, and how can we, take part in that? And I think that we have to work very carefully, and this will mean we'll have to work very closely with the town council, my staff, the FinCom, to make sure that the money that comes in, and I'll say is a given under the ARP, the American Recovery Plan Act, isn't something that we could get in a grant somewhere else. So I don't want to use ARPA money for this project when, if we had just been smarter and put a grant in, we would have got that grant as well, and we're kind of doubling our money. So I think those things we're really going to have to work together and look on. And I can see some, not saying seminars, but things like that. We lay it out on the table, and there actually is a best practice that came out from the MMA to talk about that, and also to involve the public to see what are some of the things that the public wants us to do. I mean, we have a lot of pet projects that we want to do, right? We want to have, I'm looking up here in the right-hand corner, Julie Smith Galvin wants that around the lake, right? Some bathroom facilities around the lake. Hey, I can make a case that's going to help business develop, that's going to help all these things. More trees, more better lighting downtown. All of those things are going to help business development, things that Ed's been pushing for over the years. So I think that the council, this is kind of like a fun problem to have. Let's actually, have some. We have a little bit of money. Let's use it wisely. And we have, till 2024 to spend it. We don't have to spend it all right away, and nor should we. I think, like I said, I'd be very wary about using it for programs that we can't sustain. Now, it may be that, we could put, partially in the programs and then figure we can wean off of that and cover it with tax revenue as that increases later on. But we've got to be very careful for that. So I think that's kind of what's swirling around in my head right now for that.
No, that makes sense. And as I said, as I think about sort of what the priorities are, there may be temporary operating expenses that are appropriate to fund, particularly if we think there's going to be a need for sort of a burst in spending for the schools, for example, to help combat learning loss, but that we would expect that to flatten out over time. That might make sense, but otherwise, as I said, I would be inclined to agree that we've got to be thinking about long-term investments. I would just put in a plug, as we think about, maybe some sort of, larger, more kind of legacy type projects that, we typically wouldn't have the wherewithal to think about funding. I think we're getting a lot of great feedback through the Vision 2030 process. And, when I think about some of the feedback that we heard around, parks and public spaces at the last meeting, we are going to be talking about public facilities and infrastructure at the forum on Wednesday as well. I think that's another great opportunity to make sure that as we pull all of that information together, we use that to inform, some of the decisions that we're making as we think about how to spend this money. I mean, it is a good problem to have, but I think if we don't do it wisely, it does become actually a problem over time. So appreciate the thought, Steve, that you've put into this, and look forward to continuing the discussions.
Thank you.
Maybe.
I just, two things. One, Steve, that was a great presentation. I really enjoyed that. So if that becomes a regular, April thing, it was great. And thank you and your entire team for just doing such a great job on that. I get really excited about knowing about all the potential funding out there. And I just want to, echoing a little bit what Councillor Chine said about, love the idea of getting feedback from residents and constituents about projects, whether it be bathrooms on the lake. My dad, Julie, would support you 100% on that, or another location for a community garden, or, what streets do we prioritize building sidewalks on? And the one thing I'm going to bring up here, and not just, I think, to start having conversation, is there's a lot of grant writing involved and application writing. And it's a lot for you to fall on you and your department heads. And something to think about is that, a position we can partner with some of our neighboring towns that we have shared positions with. It's such a targeted skill set. I know Julie's written grants, I've written grants before. Happy to help, but maybe we think about getting someone. A grant writer really brings in more money than we pay them usually. And so I just think it's something to think about when there is all this funding opportunity out there from the state and from the federal government. And, I know we've applied for some in the past that we just haven't been so lucky about, but I wonder having a dedicated person helping us find them and then write them might be helpful in the future.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Any other questions or comments for Steve? Julie?
I think that's interesting, and it combines what Jonathan and Maureen said. So we don't want to use this funding for things we could get a grant for otherwise, but we could use this funding as a match or a leverage to get grants. Am I interpreting it that correctly?
Yes, if it falls within the parameters of the ARP, yes.
Okay. And I said on that MMA meeting, there are some really fascinating ideas out there, and I think we should, look at what we need, but also look at best practices from around the country, because there's some fascinating things around housing even too.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Thanks. Any other comments or points? All right. I'm Steve. Thank you. That was great. That
Thank you.
nice presentation, a little preview of what's coming in May. Moving on to item number 8, and I talked to Julie quickly offline saying for some reason my internet connection is a little funky. It's usually very good. So Julie is going to pick up, she's on deck if something happens. Flag and banner requests. Our first request is a request to fly the pride flag at the American Civic Center from June 1st, 2021 through June 17th, 2021, and then re-raise it on June 23rd through June 30th. And I'm wondering, in talking with the chair of the HRC, the reason why we're pausing the pride flag for 1 week is to raise the Juneteenth flag, which is the next request. But I think I would rather not specify the exact dates, because there might be an issue where the Juneteenth flag is not precisely the 17th to the 23rd. It would be the same amount of days, but it might be shifted a little earlier. And that's because there's going to be a small celebration or folks taking part in the raising, as we did with the pride flag last year. And I think there's an issue with the timing on that. So nothing would change other than perhaps that the request is to fly the pride flag at the American Civic Center for 3 weeks in June 2021, and a request to fly the Juneteenth flag during a 4th week in June 2021. Does that make sense to folks? I just don't want to pigeon us for a particular day. Ed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the flexibility with timing is fine. I think that makes a lot of sense practically. I have no issue with the Juneteenth flag, certainly. You had mentioned the pride flag, but I saw in the letter the request had suggested potentially what was called a progress pride flag. And I know that the pride flag, and just having kind of gone through and looking just kind of across major cities, really across the world, the pride flag as we've flown it and known it to be since Stonewall in '69 has kind of, I think, become known to most of the community as the pride flag. And I'm a little bit hesitant about the idea of introducing in a variation of that, because there are a lot of variations of the pride flag, certainly. But I think in this case, being able to have community awareness is important. And because that flag has become so synonymous with the month and all that it represents. And I know that the Progress Pride flag includes, for example, the transgender flag, but LGBTQ plus, the T in that acronym is transgender. So I think that as a community, we would be better served by having the more known, recognizable symbol flying in front of the Americow during the month, as we have in the past. So that would be my request. And I should say, I've spoken to a number of people within the LGBTQ plus community, many of whom were not even familiar with the progress flag, but many of whom feel very passionately that there are really strong roots to the 1969 Stonewall flag, and that there should be some recognition and honor there. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Julie. Oh, are you?
No, but I'll say something. Did somebody else have their hand up first?
Jonathan after. Jonathan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering, I know that we do have a couple of members from the Human Rights Commission on. I was wondering maybe if we could ask them to speak about the decision on which pride flag to use. I know the little bit that I know about sort of the history of the pride flag is that there are a number of different variations, and I'm guessing this was not a recommendation or request that they made without consideration. And so maybe if we could hear some of that context.
Sure. I mean, the motion I have is just for the pride flag, so it doesn't say on the agenda. But yeah, if we could hear from Maria as chair of the HRC.
Actually,
Okay.
Madam Chair, on that, I mean, we
Yep.
do have a motion that's already before us, so I don't know that this is normally how we would handle.
I don't think we actually made a motion yet.
No, I don't think we've made a motion, but I also don't have a problem since this is the HRC is behind, you know, us doing this, hearing from a chair of one of our committees. Go ahead, Maria.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had discussed this flag at one of our previous meetings, and we went back and forth in terms of the pride flag versus the progress flag. And I think we went with the progress flag because we felt that it was more inclusive, not only of the transgender community, but also of LGBTQ people of color, because it includes the black and brown stripe also on the flag. So that was what led us to requesting that the progress flag, as opposed to the pride flag, be flown. I know, I believe Benny has done a lot more research into this, so if she's able to speak, if she has more to add, but that's all I have to say on it.
Sure. Benny, if you're on, if you just want to very briefly talk about the reason why you would suggest the progress flag.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to speak. I will say that I appreciate what Councilor Dombrowski said about the traditional pride flag representing kind of the diversity of the LGBTQ plus community broadly and like in total. And I do think a lot of people view that flag that way, and it's really, that's a huge strength of the traditional flag. The progress flag, I think, has the advantage, and one of the reasons, like Maria said, that we chose that as our recommendation, has the advantage of being very explicit in for the traditional flag. I think it's, I guess I would say implicit or like kind of assumed that everyone is included in that. And for the progress flag, it makes it more explicit by visibly including trans communities, trans individuals, Black and Brown individuals and communities, especially considering that they have, as much as Pride has had the intention of inclusion since always, there's been unfortunate like histories of exclusion and kind of stratification within queer and trans communities. And so to explicitly push back against that and say, this is a space of inclusion, even of people who are traditionally marginalized within the LGBTQ plus community. So those are, I think, the background for why we recommend the progress flag.
Great. Thank you, Benny. Julie, is your hand still up by accident?
I must never have taken it down, but I'm happy to speak.
Please speak.
I'll lower it now. Betty and Maria, thank you very much for that background, because I did not know that background. And I think that this recommendation has come to us from you, and I would like to support what the Human Rights Commission has given clearly a lot of thought to this.
Thanks, Julie. Ed?
There is another option too. I mean, there's what's commonly known as the Philly flag or the Philadelphia flag, and that is basically a variation of the more traditional pride flag that as people think of it, adding the black and brown stripes. And so it's not as if there is, not another way around this as well. I just think that the more that I don't know how in tune most people in our community are of the nuances. Clearly, even that our body is not all that in tune of all the nuances. So I think the more that we can have a recognizable symbol, the more impactful it would be. And again, the Philadelphia flag has the variation that adds the black and brown stripes. So I think it makes it an 8-striper in that case. That is, I think, also something to consider if that is the concern of this council. But I think the more we depart from what has become known as such a recognizable symbol, the less of an impact we may have on our community, running counter to what we're trying to accomplish with this.
Thanks, Ed. Maureen?
I just want to thank Maria and Benny as the liaison to the HRC. I believe I was at 2 or 3 meetings where you discussed the flag and really were deliberate about all the choices and making that recommendation. And one thing, I'm looking at Nicole Jacob, who's also an HRC member on my screen right now also. One thing that I know the HRC is going to has been more and more deliberate about, Councillor Dombrowski, is educating the community and writing letters to the editor and having a Facebook group and working with Jen McDonald. And so it's a great opportunity for them to both educate on why they're going to the progress flag or recommending the progress flag versus the traditional pride flag. I think it's a great opportunity, and they've done this as the 3rd year now that we've risen the pride flag. And I think also in addition, this is the first year, I believe, Steve, right, where we're going to have, the town has Juneteenth as a holiday because it's a statewide holiday. And so
Right.
There's going to be education about the Juneteenth flag because that'll be the first time that it'll be raised. And so I'm really excited about the HRC, fulfilling their duties of being kind of the educational, an educational committee in town and having us all learn.
Thanks, Maureen. Did we have this is my fault perhaps, is there a picture of the progress flag in the packet? Because it's interesting. I Googled it, and I can appreciate what Ed's saying with some of the images not perhaps being automatically recognizable as a pride flag. Now, maybe these, I don't know what the flag you're interested in getting, but some of these, I just, knowing that Wakefield, we might not have some folks educated in that, I would worry that they might not know what the flag stood for. So I'm curious about what image you saw, and that's my fault for not attending your meetings if you showed those images. Does that make sense, Maria?
Yes. So the one that we had agreed on and that we looked into ordering was the 8 stripes with the chevron of the colors from the transgender flag.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or sorry, the 6 stripes, and then yes, the black and brown and the colors from the transgender flag.
Thank you. Jonathan.
Thank you. One of the things that I like about the progress flag, and I definitely am sensitive to, I think what is a sort of challenging discussion around sort of what's the best symbol to represent Pride Month, and I think Councilor Dombrowski, you raise a lot of really great points. But one of the things that I do like about the progress flag is that it prompts discussions like the ones that we're having right now. And I think if it's something that gets people's attention and prompts them to sort of ask questions about, why we're showing this flag and what it means, I think that's part of the battle. And I think that's part of the opportunity that we have here. And so I am supportive of the recommendation for that reason. I hope that it's, the conversation we're having here right now is something that does get replicated throughout the month of June in Wakefield from a lot of different people, and hope that we can all use it as a chance to engage in constructive dialogue and talk about the meaning of Pride Month in a more robust way than maybe we would otherwise.
Thank you. Any other comments? Ed?
I would just be interested in how many people who are actually a part of the LGBTQ plus community weighed in on this at the HRC meeting. As in directly real, as in directly identifying.
It's a difficult question to answer because we don't ask people's sexual orientation at the meeting. So I don't know that I could give an accurate answer to that. And unless they voluntarily choose to identify.
Who voluntarily choose to identify weighed in on it, I guess, is the better question to ask.
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused by your question.
How many members who voluntarily identify weighed in on this as a part of this discussion at the HRC is my question.
I mean, we had this conversation over probably 2, possibly 3 meetings, and yeah, I'm not sure that I could give an accurate number.
I guess the only reason I'm asking is because having spoken to a number of members of the community, of the LGBTQ plus community, I've heard their perspective on that. So I'm curious to know how much of that perspective, that more direct perspective, was put into the decision making. That's the basis for my question.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just going to ask if anyone had any other questions or comments. Nope. Okay. So the motion before us is a request to fly the Progress Pride flag, which we just saw a picture of, at the Americal Civic Center for 3 weeks in June 2021. Is there a second?
Sorry, Madam Chair, so moved. I don't think we ever had made the motion.
Okay, thank you. A second?
Second.
Second, thanks, Maureen. Any further discussion on this? Okay. Roll call vote. Julie? Julie? Yes. Oh, I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry. Jonathan?
Yes.
Ed? Maureen?
Yes.
And myself, yes. All right. Thank you. Moving to the next item B, request to fly the Juneteenth flag at the Americal Civic Center for 1 week during June 2021. Do I have a motion and a second for the Juneteenth flag?
So moved.
Moved by Jonathan,
Second.
seconded by Julie. Any discussion?
One question on that.
Yep.
The dates are flexible.
The dates are flexible, right?
Oh.
No.
And Nicole Jacob is shaking her head.
And Maria asked me to make the dates flexible. So because there was an issue of when the Juneteenth celebration or people that were running that could come to the raising of it. So it's still a week, but it might not be precisely the 17th to the 23rd. Is that okay, Nicole? All right. Thank you. Any just further discussion?
Madam Chair, maybe I would just suggest to sort of slightly amend my motion to cover those dates with the provision that upon agreement of the Human Rights Commission and the town administrator, that they can be shifted to whatever 1 week time period makes the most sense.
Sure. I didn't list any specific dates.
Okay.
So I think we're good. I think we're good. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Julie?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Maureen?
Yes.
Myself? Excellent. I'm unanimous. Thanks. there's also item C is a request to hang hometown heroes banners along Main Street. And I'll give this to Steve, and then Ed may want to weigh in.
Ed, why don't you start if you want, then I can jump in, whatever you want to do.
Sure. Thank you, Steve. So we had raised the issue several meetings ago about the idea of recognizing our veterans in town. And so working with Mr. Mayo and Jay Panett and the Veteran Advisory Board, we have been able to come up with these really cool banners that are in the packets, and I hope everyone got a chance to see them. I don't know if we can put them on the screen, but it's called the Wakefield Heroes. It's a Hometown Heroes program, and it is recognizing a lot of our really most distinguished veterans. And this is the start of what we hope to be a growing project. Right now, we have, I think, close to 100, I think it's about 112 or thereabouts, veterans that will be featuring on these banners. And we hope to include more veterans, including those that are still living, certainly, as well as it goes on. But these are some of the examples of some of our older veterans from the various wars and branches, military branches, and each person is named as well as their military branch of service. And so with the council's approval, the plan would be to hang them as soon as they are available, with the expectation that would be in the early part of May. Certainly the goal is to have them up so by the time we get to Armed Forces Day on May 15th. And the request would be to keep them up until June 1st, at which point I understand that the class of 2021 banners would then go up. And then these would be obviously something that we could have in circulation and put them up at appropriate times throughout the year going forward.
Thanks, Ed. I think they're beautiful. Thank you.
If I could jump in, Madam Chair.
Sure.
So these are the Wakefield soldiers their pictures are displayed
Right.
at the junior high, or I age myself, at the Galvin Middle School.
Do the same thing.
They were on the wall of the original auditorium in the Galvin. Then they got moved out to the front there in that glass case. So these are Wakefield members of the military who died in combat. So very appropriate for them to be up on Veterans Day. For Memorial Day. And again, the goal is to get them up as soon as we get them done. It could be as early as the week of May 10th, if they get printed in time. Jay Panett did a great job with the Veterans Advisory Board of assembling this and checking all the names and what have you, and get them up there. They'll be interspersed with the Main Street banner that has the bandstand on it. And then, like Councilor Dombrowski said, we'll remove them so the class of 2021 can get up there. And our goal is to work with the Veterans Advisory Board and get more Wakefield veterans and have more of them on the polls when we get into the fall and for Veterans Day. So it's a great project. It's really been quite moving to see this. And these are, you only saw one sheet tonight, but you go back and you see some of the old uniforms, from some of the older soldiers, and it's unbelievable. They really are quite moving. So it's been kind of a fun project to do.
Steve, will the Veterans Advisory Board put out a process as to how people can get?
Yes, they are working on that.
That's great. That's awesome.
I'm sure I met with them, I think probably close to 2 months ago now. We talked through that, and they're incredibly excited about, where this can go going forward, especially with our living veterans too, to be able to
Right.
incorporate them. It'll be a great opportunity.
That's great. Thank you, Ed. So the motion would be to hang Hometown Heroes banners along Main Street. Steve, should we put in a time or?
If you wish, if you want to give us the flexibility for, to make sure if I have them May 7th, I might try to get them up
Yeah.
as early as possible.
Let's just give you the flexibility, that the town administrator has the flexibility on the timing.
Ed and I are going there to run the printing press down at, make sure they get through, so we get them.
Get them up. Perfect.
Also to Mr. Mayo's point, Jay Panett has been phenomenal in this project. It was a lot of work and he's done a phenomenal job. I mean, the images are just really impressive, really impressive. And as Mr. Mayo said, they all basically came off the wall, the Galvin, and it's just, it's been really, he's been great to work with and he's really committed.
That's great. Okay. Any further, I think, do we have a motion? I'm sorry.
So moved.
Moved by Ed,
As described.
second,
Second.
seconded by Jonathan. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Julie?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Maureen?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Great. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to item number 9, appointments. We have a motion that came to us from the Board of Appeals, I believe, who recommended this. The appointment of Building Inspector Benjamin DiCristoforo to serve as the zoning administrator and to delegate the zoning administrator the power to determine under Mass General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 6, and zoning bylaw, Section 190, 50A, whether a proposed reconstruction, change, extension, or alteration to a pre-existing non-conforming single or two-family residential structure would increase the non-conforming nature of said structure. We had more information about this in our packet, but Steve, did you just want to explain kind of in layman's terms what this allows us to do?
Sure. Many people who will live in either single or two-family homes and own them in Wakefield. Maybe their lot is a little bit too small under current zoning standards. Maybe they are a little too close to the lot line under current zoning standards. Maybe their lot coverage is a little bit too much. And they want to put a small addition on that doesn't really change any of that. It's in line with the house. They want to put on a big back deck that's in line with the house. So without having a zoning administrator, technically, these homeowners would have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals to get a finding that the reconstruction, change, or alteration or extension was not exacerbating the pre-existing nonconformity. So you think about it, if you had your house right in line with your house, just wanted to put a deck out the back door, the back of it's going to be in line with the house. It's not increasing, going closer to any of the lot lines within there. You've got to go to the Board of Appeals. You might have to sit through hours of hearings, hire an attorney, what have you. Might have cost you more money and more time than to build the deck itself. Two things happen. You have a very frustrated homeowner who doesn't think that government's working for them, or they say, forget it, I'm going to build this without going through the permit process, which means it may not be safe. We will not get the building permit fees. We will not get the assessment because there's no, until the assessor goes out. So Jack Roberto had this, in fact, I think around 2000, around the year 2000 or so, or maybe in late 1900s. I was the one who was pushing to give Jack that authority years ago in another life. Ben has proven himself to be a great building inspector. This is much better for the homeowner, much more convenient, and it helps the whole process along. It doesn't clog the Board of Appeals with things that are kind of rote, what have you. If someone is aggrieved by this, either a person who who it's their home and Ben doesn't feel he can make the call, then they can go to the Board of Appeals and get that finding. Or if a neighbor doesn't like it, they can go to the Board of Appeals and file if they feel aggrieved. I don't know if Town Council Mullen wants to add into that at all, but I think that pretty much is a nutshell.
No, I think Stephen said it all. As he said, Jack Roberto had this authority. It's a designation that has to be made specifically to the person. That is, the ZBA can't say our building inspector will always be the zoning administrator. You've got to name the individual. And that name has to appear in the rules and regulations of the ZBA, which are on file with the town clerk. So getting this done is an important step in making it easier for owners of single and two-family houses to make really innocuous changes to their prior non-conforming structures.
Thank you, Tom. Does anyone have any questions for either Tom or Steve on this? Julie?
Time appointment, so as long as Ben is in this position, we don't have to renew it or anything? Is that how it works?
That's right. You don't have to renew it, and the ZBA could always change its designation, in which case
Oh,
they
okay.
change their rules and regulations.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, if someone could make a motion and a second to appoint Benjamin DiCristoforo, our building inspector, to serve as the zoning administrator, and delegate the zoning administrator the powers as previously read and stated in the packet.
So moved.
Moved by Jonathan. Seconded by Julie. Yes, I'm just calling on people now. Any further conversation? Seeing none, roll call vote. Julie?
Yeah.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Maureen?
Yes.
And myself. Excellent. Item 9B, a request from the Disability Commission to add an additional voting member as previously recommended. I think we heard from Marie Ray why she thought that was important. And just as we recently added members to the Veterans Commission, and clearly they have helped Jay Panett with his work as requested, I think this is also a fairly easy ask. The request is to add one additional voting member to go from 8 to 9. 9 seems to be a number that a lot of these committees are falling on. And I think for committees that have been working together for a long time, to recognize, thoughtfully when they might want to add a member or two, makes sense. Sherry, I just would need, I guess we would add the member and then appoint the person. Okay, so kind of 2 votes.
Yeah.
Okay. So if someone could make a motion and a second, and then we can have a discussion on increasing the number of voting members from 8 to 9 on the Disability Commission.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Moved by Jonathan, seconded by Julie. Any discussion? Ed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do think because we have a board of 8, an even number, it does make sense to make it an odd number. And I think the reasons were articulated in a a very thoughtful way. I do though think going forward, and I think it will end up applying to a lot of these boards, commissions, and committees. We really need to be able to draw distinctions just across the board between voting and non-voting members, because right now I think too often people are associating the voting powers with being a part of a commission, committee, or board. And I'm not even suggesting it's the case here per se, but in general. So just like we have alternates and all the rest, for, let's say, like ZBA or some non-voting members of any other number of committees or commissions or boards, I think we really need to take a closer look to figure out what is the optimal number. I think in some cases, probably more does make sense. I think in other cases, less may make sense. So it's I think a part of a broader discussion and analysis we should probably do going forward. But as far as this particular, I think going to 9 and having an odd number makes sense.
Thank you. I sometimes think us going down to 5 makes sense. So I totally appreciate your comment. Okay. And so let me take a motion on adding the number, and then Sherry, I'll just need help with the name. I wrote it down and I can't see it in my notes.
Yeah, sure.
So motion and a second to increase. I think we did that. So now the vote to increase Disability Commission to 9. Julie? Muted?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Maureen?
Yes.
Myself? Thank you. Sherry, can you please remind me of the person we are possibly appointing?
Sure. Her name is Janice Marabassi.
Thank you. Do I have and I think we have seen her resume. Do I have a motion and a second to appoint Janice Marabassi to that 9th position? And this is for a 3-year term. Moved by Jonathan,
Second.
seconded by Maureen. Any further discussion? Ed?
I'm just wondering, should we not be posting for this?
I
Since
think
we're at-
we did post for it.
Yes.
When, right, along with all the others I'm saying, but now that we've
Right.
added this new position, I mean, does it make sense for us to offer it out to see if the applicant pool is broad? I don't have any issue with the applicant. I'm just wondering, procedurally, do we want to, when we're adding, slots, do we want to post for it or just appoint who had previously applied? I'm just asking the body, I'm not taking a strong opinion.
Sherry, when this was posted last time, did we have more names than Janice, or was she like the last woman
Yeah.
standing?
Yeah, she was the only other one. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't have a problem. Certainly she has shown interest, and we don't have any other applicants, and that we could have had extra applicants. So I appreciate you pointing it out, Ed. I don't have a concern, as we have, we did post, and this has been certainly on the agenda for a little bit. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none. We have a motion and a second, I believe.
Yes, correct.
Okay, excellent. The vote. Julie?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Maureen?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Thank you. Okay. Item number 9C is, and you might have all seen the letter and remember our appointments we did last week. A request from the Arts Council to add 3 additional voting members as previously recommended. It would move them from 6 to 9, which I thought the presentation of the Arts Council, why they wanted to go up to 9, certainly made sense. And we would be appointing 1 to a 3-year term and 2 to 2-year terms. There are 3 applicants to the openings. So would someone like to make a motion in a second to increase the number from 6 to 9 for voting? And then we can have discussion, and I can imagine what the discussion is going to be. I appreciate it. I also don't think 9 is too unwieldy. It seems to be a number we're kind of settling on for a lot of these committees, 9 voting members. Motion in a second to increase Arts Council to 9.
Motion.
Moved by Julie, seconded by
Second.
Jonathan. Discussion. All right, seeing Ed.
I would just say, Madam Chair, the Arts Council, I just follow up with them, and they explained specific reasons as to why going to 9 made sense, including, and I don't know that everyone has access to that information, but it was issues of term limits, issues of potential compromised funding opportunities if the number drops too low. So there were some legitimate reasons that were spelled out relative to this. I do think that, one of the things that stood out to me with this is when we send, or I should say when Clerk Dalton sends these out to the various chairs, and then they go through them and look at these applications, more times than not, we get back responses like this one. The council agrees that all applicants are welcome. Of course, and there's no question that I think anyone looking at these applications would say, yeah, it'd be great to have them on. But again, I think we need to be able to draw the distinction going forward of voting versus non-voting. And the other piece that I've noticed in this cycle is that while I really appreciate the input from the chair, oftentimes about applicants that have come in, undoubtedly, unless you have some sort of personal animus, towards one of your members, a chair is likely to say, yeah, that person's great, they should stay on. And if we have, I mean, if you think of Madam Chair, if you were to be asked about any of us, I would hope that you would have kind words for us to someone else, or most
Depends on the week, but yes, mostly
I
yes.
suppose we don't know if that's actually true.
Yeah, I suppose so. Maybe it's a leap of faith. But that being said, I'm concerned about us kind of creating this cycle of what kind of, once you're in the system, and that would potentially prevent new folks from coming in, because if we have two slots and the same two people, it's like the inclination of a chair, I think, is probably in most cases to be deferential to those already serving. And so I think we need to be mindful of that.
I think that's a great point. And I know I was eviscerated for not going along with the chair on one of their recommendations in the not too recent distant past. So I appreciate that. And that was something Phyllis Hull, may she rest in peace, was really strongly supported, that we should get new blood in. But I also think it's good for someone who's only been serving for a couple of years or a year, for them to be able to grow into the spot as well. So absolutely, that's a good point. So a vote on increasing the number of the Arts Council to 9. Julie?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Maureen?
Yeah. Yes.
Myself, yes. And the next vote would be to appoint the 3 names included in the packet: Lori Dupuy, Stephanie Marinovich, and Diana Kennedy, all who were really impressive. It was blown away by the resumes. And I would suggest Lori Dupuy be appointed to the 3-year term, and Stephanie Marinovich and Diana Kennedy to the 2-year terms. A motion and a second, we can have discussion on that.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Jonathan,
Second.
seconded by Julie. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote for the appointments as just noted. Julie? Yes. Jonathan?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Maureen?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Excellent. We have 9D is appointments of the Human Rights Commission and adoption of the purpose, powers, and duties. And I think I'll go into the purpose, powers, and duties first. And I know that Maria has a really short presentation, just an update on the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, everyone, for letting me be here tonight. And I want to also thank Benny Wheat and Nicole Jacob, who are fellow members of the Human Rights Commission. So I just want to be brief, just to give an overview as to the Human Rights Commission, what we've done over the past 5.5 years and what we're currently working on. Ryan, thank you for putting up the slides. If you could go to the next one, that would be great. So just to refresh everyone's memory, to date, we have 11 voting members, 8 voting members previously appointed separately, then jointly appointed by the Town Council and School Committee. Originally, we had 6 voting members, which were 3 and 3 from each board. And in spring of 2018, with the approval of both boards, we added an additional voting member. We also have 1 clergy member, 1 police officer, and 1 student as voting members. We have 3 ex officio non-voting members: the chief of police, town administrator, and superintendent. And we also have liaisons from the town council, school committee, and youth council who regularly attend our meetings. We were voted voted into existence in August of 2015. So we are well into our 5th year, I guess our 6th year of existence. So next slide, please. So over the past 5 years, we have done what Bill Chetwin talked about in celebrating diversity. We've done 5 years of the Martin Luther King, Coretta Scott King event. We just finished our 5th year of the International Women's Day event, which highlighted local female-owned businesses here in Wakefield. Both of those events this year really, because we had to do everything virtually, they really highlighted The focus was to highlight local people and local businesses, and we got a great response on both of them. So that was very exciting. Also, for the past 3 years, we've had a fall speakers event with the Unitarian Universalist Church on varying issues, including transgender issues, anti-racism, and human trafficking. For 2 years, and now going on the 3rd year, we have had a celebration of Pride Month, including the flag raising at the Civic Center. We have participated in a number of different community events. Just a few of those are Wakefield 101, Festival Italia, International Night at the Galvin Middle School, Festival by the Lake, and the Farmers Market. We have an ongoing collaboration with a number of different groups, including the library, the METCO program, the Boys and Girls Club, the Anti-Defamation League. So both on a very local community level and also on a larger regional level. I would also include in that collaboration the Massachusetts Human Rights and Relations Coalition, which is a statewide network of human rights organizations. And then beyond that, we also do some advocacy on statewide issues, including the transgender anti-discrimination bill from several years ago and the current Massachusetts Indigenous legislative agenda. Moving on and looking at what we've done this year and looking forward. So some of you may have seen the posters that are up in the kiosks around town, the One Wakefield messaging campaign. We just feel like just over the past year, things have gotten more divisive, and we were looking for a way to bring people together and show that we're all part of the same community. And one of our youth council liaison had created some artwork. And so roughly every 3 months, we're changing out those posters. We also conducted with Quabbin Mediation, an organization out in the Berkshires. They ran 2 active bystander trainings, which were fully subscribed. So many more people were not able to participate that we are planning more in May, which we are co-sponsoring with Wakefield Alliance Against Violence. We have created a new member orientation. So it's an onboarding for new members to tell them about the history of the HRC, the workings, our policies, just to basically orient them to how the organization works. We did so many of our activities had to go virtual this year. So in October, around Indigenous Peoples Day, we did a number of virtual book readings with the help of the library. We did the same for Black History Month. We did virtual book readings with various members of the community reading. This coming May is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Awareness Month. And one of the things that has been so exciting, we put an announcement out to the various schools in Wakefield and asked if there are people that would like to participate and share something about their heritage for this month, that we would love to work with them. And we have heard back from a number of members of the community. So it's really exciting to see people excited about sharing their culture and their ethnicity and weaving it into Wakefield and making it a more diverse community. We're also, as we said earlier, observing Juneteenth with a flag raising and hopefully a ceremony which will include a singer, someone reading poetry, and also a speaker talking about the history of Juneteenth and the importance of it. We are in the process of ordering more "Hate Has No Home Here" signs after receiving a number of requests from people who either had signs and they've kind of gotten weather worn or wanted some new ones. We're also, at the request of one of our, this is an idea by one of our current commissioners about networking with local HRCs. So we've reached out to Reading, Linfield, Melrose, Stoneham, and North Reading, and all very enthusiastically responded and said that they would love to work with us about different issues that we have in common, like sharing ideas for different events and collaboration. So it's a great start of a networking opportunity. To come, what we're looking at is ongoing anti-racism work, improving our communication with the community so that more people know about our events and want to get involved. We also want to build up our volunteer base to help spread the workload, because we are excited about our work, but we are exhausted. We also want to partner with more groups in town. We're currently working on creating an archive of past events because it's a lot to kind of keep track of. And we want to keep it all in one place for future members. And as always, we want to continue with more education to celebrate the diversity in our community. So happy to answer whatever questions anyone has. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Maria. Does anyone have questions for Maria, or we can also move to talking about or ratifying the purpose, powers, and duties of the Wakefield Human Rights Commission, and then moving on to some appointments? Any initial questions for Maria? Okay, so there's adoption of the purpose, powers, and duties, which you all have in your packet. This last year, as you can remember, we spoke about getting together and having a discussion to focus the documents behind the HRC and make it very clear how it was run and what the policies were, and the voting, because the initial document certainly threw some things up to had some ambiguities. And I'll accept fault for being the pandemic, and it wasn't the first thing on my mind, but my door also wasn't being banged down with folks wanting to discuss this. However, Steve and Maria, I would say, took a huge step forward in working together to come up with a document that I think really addresses the soul of what the HRC is. And other members have given some great input into that. I had looked at it over, I don't know, the last couple of weeks. Any other member could have involved themselves as well, and some actually did. A couple of things that we changed was the voting of it. So the town council now will appoint 9 members of the HRC. And that is part of an 11-member voting. So 9 voting members appointed by the HRC, strike that, by the TC. 1 member of the clergy, a voting member, will be recommended by the clergy council and ratified by us, appointed by us. 1 student voting member recommended by the superintendent will then come before us to be voted on. The police department employee is being moved out of a voting member to a non-voting liaison for a number of really good reasons, I think. And then there are 3 ex officio members, and that's in full acceptance in support of the police, by the way, that shift. And 3 ex officio non-voting members, which is town administrator, superintendent of schools, and chief of police. So I think, frankly, having gone through it last year, I don't think it was sustainable to have joint meetings each time with the school committee, each time we needed to appoint a member. For those of us who worked on the front lines of that, it was really difficult to do. What I'll talk to the school committee about, or whoever takes over my spot, is to have school committee member or members be liaisons to the HRC with regard to membership, so that a school committee liaison could view resumes and could talk about, could ask their board in their own meeting any concerns or recommendations they have. Because the school committee, I don't want to suggest that they didn't do a good job or we're taking them out of it, but as a liaison, they certainly can take part in this. It's just was not sustainable moving forward to have a joint meeting to appoint every single member. So this lines up more with, certainly, and with, talking with Maria and Steve, it lines up with what other committees in town do. Steve, do you want to say anything?
No, I agree. Thank you, Madam Chair. And Maria did yeoman's work on this, so it was great working with Maria on this. And we took this on to move it forward. And I do agree that the town council being the primary appointer is really indicative of the fact that most of the issues, or 99.9% of the issues, come back to the town council anyway on this. And I was always a little uncomfortable years and years ago. Those joint appointments are hard, and it's bad enough when we do it, when we appoint someone to a board, when someone, elected board, when someone left. So doing that every year was kind of too cumbersome, I think is the best word. So I think this kind of does what I think the town council wanted and requested, I think back in October when we met on this. So, and if it can always be changed at a later date by the town council or if the Human Rights Commission says that they don't like something, and then they can always come back to the town council and ask for an update or a change. So.
I think two important changes that were made and that we had been talking about for months, actually over months, over a year, I would say, is the inclusion of having implicit bias training for members of the Human Rights Commission, and also a statement of civility. Every single board in this town, including ours, should have that. Every town employee should be trained in implicit bias. So I don't want anyone to take that as a focus just on HRC, my goodness. Every member and every town employee, I think, or staff, we're talking about will be trained in implicit bias. Because we don't have that yet, I know Steve is looking at vendors. As soon as that we have something viable in place, then we'll push this out to the other committees, and certainly our own committee, and Steve will take care of it on the town side. All right, that said, why don't we have a motion and a second to adopt the purpose, powers, and duties of the HRC, and then we can have any discussion of members of the town council. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Julie, any discussion on the purpose, powers, and duties? Okay, Jonathan.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who worked on this. I do think that having effectively sort of a lowercase c charter for our boards and commissions is really important. And my hope is that this is something that we can actually use as a template for all of the boards and commissions in town. And I would say including the town council. Obviously a lot of what we do is written in our capital C charter, but certainly I think there are some, policies and practices that we've kind of followed by tradition historically that, I think would bear some validity in terms of documenting on paper. And so, I hope that, as we kind of reorganize at our next meeting, one of the things that we prioritize over the next year is kind of taking a similar document or a framework, maybe even expanding it in some areas. So we talk about expectations around allowance for public participation, how agendas are formatted, things like that, and then work with other boards and committees to disseminate that further. I had just a couple of, I guess, sort of comments or questions about this document that I wanted to talk through, just to really get a sense as to, maybe some opportunities for, either some friendly edits to it or at least areas for further discussion. The first is, while I definitely understand and appreciate the complexity of trying to do appointments jointly with the school committee. I think that is a cumbersome process, and that's not something that I think makes sense to continue. I am a little wary of the fact that there's nothing kind of formally in the policies and procedures document that sort of ties the school committee into the HRC. Obviously the superintendent's an ex officio member, but I think that there's a lot of validity and I think a lot of importance to having the school committee play a more formal role. And so one thing that I'd like to suggest is maybe sort of articulating in this document a specific role for a school committee liaison as a non-voting member, described in the same way that we describe the police liaison, but having it in there so we don't lose sight of that in the future, and so that we do have a formal way where a designee of the school committee can be part of the discussions that the HRC is having. Again, I know the superintendent's on there, but I think having board representation, in a liaison capacity is also important. The second thing that I wanted to maybe highlight is there is a provision in there related to residency requirements for members of the HRC. And this is one where I'd ask us maybe to think about that a little bit differently, because I do think there are some scenarios where there may be value in having non-residents serve on the Human Rights Commission. One example might be Metco students who are attending Wakefield High School, making sure that those individuals have the opportunity to serve as the student representative on the Human Rights Commission.
Jonathan, I think that was addressed though. Before you go into it, I think this student is not required to be a resident.
I did not see that.
I talked to Steve specifically about that point earlier.
So the document that we have in our packet says, with the exception of the clergy council appointment. But certainly I think, it would address a lot of my concern if that would be with the exception of the clergy council and student appointments.
Absolutely. That might have just been
That could be there, Jonathan. I don't know how that got.
Okay.
You're
yeah, I'd assume that was in there as well, Jonathan, from what I had seen before my conversation. So yeah, with the absolutely exception of clergy and student.
Okay. Yep. The other thing, though, I would mention on the residency requirement, and this is not something that we necessarily need to solve for or address today, but I could also see a scenario where there would be value in having either a business leader or nonprofit leader from Wakefield who isn't necessarily a resident be a representative on the Human Rights Commission. And again, I don't think that that's as critical of an issue for me as making sure that the student position is open to a Metco student. But I think that's something that we should think about for a commission like this, because certainly as we think about our business community, as we think about some of the really strong nonprofits in town, there's leadership in those entities that certainly is part of our community, even if they don't have a residential address in Wakefield. And while I certainly wouldn't want non-residents to be a majority of the Human Rights Commission, there may be validity in having one of the 9 appointees happen to be someone who isn't necessarily a resident. So that was the second thing. And then just the third thing, under the functions and powers in section 2, where we do talk about some of the areas of focus, I would actually suggest maybe broadening that list a little bit. Specifically, I would really encourage us to add disability, age, country of origin, immigration status, health status, and justice-involved individuals as possible areas of scope for the HRC to focus on. I know it's intended to be broad by saying not limited to, but I just think there were some specific categories of potential areas of interest that I would encourage us to add as well. Okay. So those are just some areas, again, some opportunities that I would like to see sort of expanded in the document. Again, though, I do want to go back to my initial comment that that's not to take away from the accomplishment of what's been put together here, because I do think that it is an excellent start. I do think that it's a great effort on the part of a lot of individuals, including Madam Chair. I know yourself as being actively involved in it. And so, I don't want to take away anything from what's been put together, because like I said, I do think it is a great template for us to replicate across the board.
Jonathan, your last point, you said disability, age, what else?
Disability, age, country of origin, immigration status, health status, and justice-involved individuals.
I'm feeling quite stupid, but what is a justice-involved individual?
Justice-involved individual is anyone who's had prior encounters with the criminal justice system. And so given that sort of, we know that there's obviously a fair amount of racial discrimination and profiling in terms of how individuals may experience encounters with the justice system. I thought that would be something else that's kind of a potential area of focus or opportunity going forward. It's not meant to be obviously prescriptive in terms of what the HRC focuses on, but certainly within the scope of what could be considered.
Okay. I mean, I certainly have no problem adding disability, age, country of origin, immigration status, and health status. The last one I'm not so sure of, because I think it can be race, sexual orientation, gender, ethnicity can all fit that as well. So I like those first several ideas to add. I'm not so sure about that last one, which does not mean I am against the concept, but just putting it in the document. Okay, I mean, I'd love to get this, voted on. So if Julie, we can talk about some of the points that Jonathan made. Julie?
Okay, I mean, I just had two other minor points, and I think Maria alluded to one of them, is just the concern that I heard when people saw this coming up was by having the school committee not appointing people, losing some of the younger families and whatnot. So I don't know whether that's something we formalize in here, but certainly when we're advertising, making every effort to go through the school system.
Sure.
And perhaps Jonathan's kind of formalization of the school committee liaison would assist with that as well. So something to think about. May not need to go officially in there. The other thing is I know I participated in the Human Rights Commission meeting last week, and very, very impressive, and some difficult conversations, and I appreciate everybody who showed up, and Chief Scory did as well. And Maria moderated a very good meeting. But it also makes me realize, Steve, you've got a lot going on. Doug has a lot going on. I don't know how often you make it, but it seems like a minor thing to say, you're ex officio or your designee, and really try to expand some of the staff participation. Whether that's Cara from Doug, but just really, I think the work that the HRC is doing, staff beyond just the top level could really contribute and benefit from it. That's all I have.
Jonathan, more comments?
No, I just don't think I lowered my hand.
Ed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With the student piece, I don't have issue with who it is, but I think we just have to be clear. If we're saying like an out of town student, then I think we need to just be clear that it's either a student of the Wakefield public school system or a Wakefield resident, because you could have a private school student who lives in Wakefield, who I think is equally eligible to apply. But I don't think we want to have a situation where it could be interpreted as we have a student from Reading who has no connection to Wakefield. But a little read of that. I actually like the way that it's currently written. I think it's, as I understand, intended to be deliberately broad. So I don't know that we have to, be micro editing it to the extent that it seems like we're heading down the path with. I think that it is meant to be deliberately broad and all encompassing. I mean, as I understand it, it's gone through a number of edits, and a number of folks have already seen it. Jonathan, I wish you had looked at it at home because Maria had worked so much on it. But I think that as it's currently written, I think it's in pretty good shape, and I don't know that I would necessarily make all the changes that Councilor Chine suggested.
Madam Chair, if I could just respond to that, while I appreciate that others may have had the opportunity to look at this, I think for many of us on the council, the first time we saw it was when it was in the packet that went out on Saturday. And so, I would appreciate, I think, if we could have a little bit of, sort of latitude and flexibility in kind of evaluating this at this meeting, given that, again, this is relatively new information for some of us. So in that case, Madam Chair, why don't we just table it then and bring it back to the next meeting after people have had a chance to review it?
I have no problem with that. And I think in doing so, reaching out to the school committee, we had done that and did not get a response. So I will do it. I'll have a week to do it. I'll reach out to the school committee to just talk to them about how they might want to be incorporated more formally into the document. So I think that, that's a good suggestion, but I don't want to incorporate them without having talking. I don't want to presume that the school committee is going to assign a liaison, because that's not my committee. So I think tabling it and bringing it up at our next meeting is not a problem. Do we have Jonathan?
Madam Chair, I think it's fine to come back to it, and collect some of the revisions that I think, Councillor Smith-Galvin and I and perhaps others would suggest. I would just recommend, I think because there's no dispute about the composition of the voting members, at least that I'm hearing in this discussion, I would just maybe suggest that we move ahead with the appointments there so that we're not, leaving the Human Rights Commission without a full contingent of members.
That was my
for
intention.
some additional time.
Yep, that was my intention, to absolutely do the voting members. So, as long as we don't wordsmith this to death, council, because I think it's a pretty good document, I am willing to table it. And it's not just my decision. With regard to the vote, so we have, the suggestion is to have the 9 voting members appointed by the town council, which is part of those 11 members. And we've seen the resumes, again, so impressive. And we have 5 members to appoint tonight. Eileen Rooney, Jeremy Little, Teresa Aravena Gonzalez, Lindsay Averbrook, and Daniela Nedbala. So I know that there is 1 3-year term, 2 2-year terms. Oh no, that's the Art Council, sorry. 3 3-year terms, 1 2-year term, and 1 1-year. I believe that's correct. And my suggestion would be that we appoint Teresa Aravena Gonzalez and Jeremy Little to the 2 3-year terms, as they have served for at least a year and seem to be really interested in going forward. I think that's great. Eileen Rooney to the 2-year term, and Daniela Nedbalak to the 1-year term. But my notes, Sherry or Steve, help me. Am I missing 1 3-year?
Yeah, you're missing, yeah.
Okay, so Eileen Rooney to the 3-year term, Daniela Nedbalak to the 2-year term, and then do we have, are we doing Lindsay as well?
Right, we could do a 1-year term.
To the 1-year term.
Mhm.
Did everyone follow that? Okay. So the motion is to appoint Teresa Aravena Gonzalez, Jeremy Little, and Eileen Rooney to 3-year terms.
Yeah.
Daniela Nedbalak to a 2-year term, and Lindsay Averbrook to the 1-year term. Do I have a motion and a second? So moved, people.
So moved.
Moved
Second.
Moved by Jonathan, seconded by Maureen. Any discussion?
I just want to point out, I think we're missing Councillor Donaco now in terms of being quicker on these motions. So
I know the
we'll
next
all
chair.
have to get used to his absence.
Yeah,
given
the
that
next
last
chair
time
needs
was
to
last
assign
meeting.
people.
Yeah.
Ed.
Just in looking at the staggering, I did notice that Daniela Nedbalak seemed to have identified the HRC as a kind of a secondary interest from what, based on her write-up. So I think that she would be better for the 1-year term initially, and then based upon where her interest lies after that year, perhaps then she could consider extending that. So I would just suggest that the ordering of those last 2 nominees flip.
Okay,
Madam
any,
Chair, my recollection is that she had withdrawn, and I apologize, I can't remember what the other commission was that she had applied for, but I thought in the last meeting she had withdrawn from that other consideration for the other
Yeah,
commission.
she did withdrew from the Conservation Commission, but she did put her name in for the Environmental Sustainability Committee, which will be coming up at our second meeting in May. So she put her name in for that one as well.
okay, so perhaps appointing Lindsay, is it Averbook? Am I getting that right?
Averbook.
Averbook, Lindsay Averbook to a 2-year term and Daniela Nedbala to a 1-year term. Does that make sense? Any comments on that from the town councilors?
I would
No.
just say, Madam Chair, that I just think Lindsay has a unique background that I think is the mental health and substance abuse background, I think was a unique compliment. And Daniela starts off her write-up by saying, my number one passion in life is sustainability. So I think that it's a natural adjustment to make.
Sure, and she talks about working on other certainly human rights related issues, but I appreciate the comment. Jonathan,
Madam
did you?
Chair, I can amend my motion for to switch the 2 terms. So we'll amend
Perfect.
that for Daniela Nedbalik for the 1-year term and Lindsay Averbook for the 2-year term.
Great, excellent. As amended, any further comments? All right, seeing none. Voting Eileen Rooney, Jeremy Little, Teresa Aravena Gonzalez to a 3-year term, Lindsay Averbook to a 2-year term, Daniela Nedbala to the 1-year term. Julie?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Maureen?
Yes.
Anne? Yes. I was actually waiting for Anne to say something. I always get a little loopy at the end, people. Sorry about that. Awesome. Thank you so much. And we will let you know when folks have a chance to look at it, but the document was outstanding. And Maria, I know how hard you worked on this. So kudos to you and Steve. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Item number 10, the intermunicipal agreement between Town of Reading and Town of Wakefield for purposeful opportunities for successful transition program, the post program. Steve, this is something we do every year, I think.
Yes,
No?
I note that Christina Bufagner is here from the school department if there's any questions. We entered into an agreement with basically the town of Reading to, continue the education for some of our special education students through the age of 22, I believe. We did this a number of years ago, and it's worked out very, very well. We housed this school at the right near the Greenwood Fire Station. And we actually have some other communities join us, and it's worked out very well, and we've never had a problem, and it's really helped a number of students continue on their education and really try to transition them into the working world. So Christina's here. Maybe she wants to add a few things, but I would recommend approval.
Sure. Christina, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everyone, for renewing this tonight. It is another 3-year agreement with the town of Reading. School committee has already voted and approved it. It's a very successful program for 18 to 22-year-olds. And we share this program with the town of Reading. We share the costs and services. Basically, in the agreement, you can see, depending on how many students from Reading and from Wakefield. We're also, right now, we have a student from Stoneham that is tuitioned in. But again, it is very successful for both towns. And again, it's voted on by school committee and the town council. And we just hope that you support it. And also the contract was just renewed and vetted by Attorney Mullen, and he gave it his thumbs up, and I think we're good to go.
Thank you so much, Christine. Does anyone have any questions for Christine or Steve? All right, seeing none. Can I please have a motion and a second to approve the purposeful opportunities for successful transition program, the post program?
So moved.
Moved by Ed.
Second.
Seconded by Jonathan. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Julie? Yes. Jonathan?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Maureen?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Excellent. Christine, thank you so much for hanging in there.
Thank you for your support. Have a good night.
You as well. Okay. Are there any matters not anticipated for the agenda? Okay, seeing, as opposed to announcements. Okay, Jonathan?
Just one matter not anticipated, and really just a question for Mr. Mayo. Have we had any updates on the Broadway crossing and our friend at the FRA down in DC signing off on that?
Sadly, no, but no news is good news. I've reached out to Senator Moulton's office, Representative Moulton's office, Senator Markey's office, asking them, can you step in? Can you walk down the hall? Can you move this from whatever? Sadly, no, I am waiting. You'll know as soon as I know. So I guess no news is good news. So
well,
our local
news would be better news, but
no, good news, better news. Yes.
And Steve, I just want to underscore that when one of the councils had brought up a few weeks ago to put the information on the website, it was on in the following days. So if folks want to find out about, like as Steve said, when we know information, we put it up there. So residents can certainly go on our website, not Facebook, although I think it might be on Facebook as well, but we have a button on the website that's been up there since we asked to put it up there a few weeks ago. Julie. Oh, I can't mute.
Muted. Just a couple of questions and maybe even more observations, things I've heard. So the question about committees having public participation, Tom, is that something you can speak to? Do all committees, I guess there was an issue with the planning board not having it posted as public participation. Can you walk us through that just so people understand?
Yeah, no committee ever has to have public participation, which I define as an opportunity for any member of the public to speak for some particular period of time that is not moored to a public hearing that's required by some statute or bylaw. Your board your council has chosen to create such an opportunity for the public. Other boards sometimes do as well. I think that your question arises in the context of some criticism or questions about whether the planning board, the ZBA, and the Conservation Commission should do the same. I would urge them never to consider doing so.
Okay.
That's because unlike your council, unlike the school committee, these are primarily adjudicatory boards. They exist to hold public hearings. There's almost nothing you could say to one of those boards that's meaningful that doesn't relate to one or more public hearings. And I would recommend to the chair that he never entertain any discussion concerning the subject of a public hearing outside the public hearing. It's unfair to the parties.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Madam Chair, can I just ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. That's really helpful. Can you speak a little bit about, so when we think about a public hearing, when we have public hearings in the town council, they're usually, 10 minutes of an otherwise busy agenda. With the ZBA, they have public hearings that may go on for several months. Can you talk a little bit about the public participation requirement in a hearing that gets continued for month after month after month and how that plays out?
Sure. If you have to have a public hearing because of some statute or bylaw requirement, then you have to give notice of the hearing. In most cases, both to the public in general through publication and also to specific persons, typically abutters and abutters to abutters by mailed notice. You only have to do that once. And once you open that hearing with the first session, you can continue it from one meeting to another. And you can continue it as long as you want, provided that you don't either run out of time, because there's usually a time limit in the statute about how long you can run your hearing, or if there is a time limit, if you enter into an agreement between the board and the developer, typically the the person who has sought the hearing, to extend that limit. What's crucial is that as you end one session of the public hearing, you state on the record where, when, and on what date and what time the next session of that public hearing will be held. That's the only notice that the public is entitled to. But without that notice, you've got a big problem. And I would, in general, recommend to boards, and I do this all the time when, say, snowstorms prevent a second or third planned session from occurring, that as expensive as it is, they re-advertise and remail the notice if they miss a planned session.
And just from the participation perspective on that, for a hearing that gets continued, you know, if you have participation in that first session and then kind of move on to the deliberation of the body, is that sufficient to meet the public participation requirement for a public hearing, or does that obligation have to continue as the hearing gets continued?
So there is typically an obligation to hold a public hearing where members of the public, not necessarily limited to Wakefield residents, have the right to speak and be heard. Once you have heard all the people who want to speak on the subject, then the chair should announce that the public hearing is closed. And at any point after that, the board can conduct its deliberations. Those deliberations have to be done in public. The public has to have the right to see what's going on, but has no right to participate. The only right to participate occurs during the public hearing. And in fact, I would recommend never allow anybody to participate after you've closed the public hearing, because then you've de facto opened it up again. And if one person can comment, then everybody can.
Yeah. But as long as that public hearing is open, even if it gets continued, there is still an opportunity under the statute for participation.
That's right. Typically, when we continue from one session to another, it's not for deliberation. Deliberation usually doesn't take that long. It's usually to continue the public hearing. That's where the big time consumption typically is.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. I have gotten, I think, a lot of the same questions and concerns that Councillor Smith-Galvin has gotten, and so I think that's helpful context to share for folks in the public. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other announcements they'd like to make? Ed.
I just wanted to quickly mention, Madam Chair, having been out running around Wakefield a lot recently, but also some other communities, it really is striking when we have these areas where sidewalks do end. And so I do think a priority for us going forward as a council, and it seems to be the consensus of, I think, everyone here tonight, really continuing to make that a priority. I know we've talked about it. I know that DPW is doing all that they can with what's been budgeted with that, but the connectivity issue is such a huge issue here. And so and it's been striking seeing some other communities that I think perhaps have done it a bit better than we have. But I know that we can do it, certainly. And we obviously have our very comprehensive roads plan, which is a credit, I think, to this council, and then also bringing it to town meeting in DPW, which is the first time we have a very, very systematic way of strategically addressing the roads. So I'm encouraged to see that we're already making forward progress with that. That's a multi-year plan, as those know. We voted on it. But it's going to be really make an impact. Just reminding everyone to go out to vote tomorrow. Polls open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And also, I think this is the last meeting that we're going to have before town meeting, which is on Saturday, May 8th. And that, I mean, we're talking about a $102 million budget, Mr. Mayo, I believe. And
yes.
So the idea of having such a low turnout at town meeting, when we're talking about the direct impact you can make on the tax dollars that that we're voting on. So please turn out. It'll be at the high school in the field house. It starts at 8 a.m. I believe, Mr. Mayo, and there are so many accommodations being made to make it as positive an experience for everybody. And I know Mr. Mayo and WCAT have worked really hard on that, so thank you for that. But please mark it on your calendar now and make plans to attend because it matters. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Julie, then Jonathan.
I know Paul's not here, but I bet he's watching, because how could he resist not watching on a second or fourth Wednesdays or Mondays? So thanks, Paul. Steve, the voting proposals are in and we're opening. I just want to make sure that people know we're opening those for public input. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, and we may have a session at our next meeting to have a questioning of the two parties that proposed.
Oh, good. Okay, so there'll be an opportunity to hear from both of them
Right.
and for people to review and they'll be on our website. Is that
Yep.
correct? Okay. I think that's all. I second Ed's go out and vote tomorrow. I look forward to seeing everybody out there.
Jonathan, and then Maureen.
Thank you. Just continuing on the topic of civic engagement, and actually this ties in well, Councilor Dabrowski, your comment about the sidewalks. That was one of the big pieces of feedback we heard in the first virtual public forum for Vision 2030. And so I just want to remind folks that the second virtual public forum is coming up on Wednesday. So if you're still on your sugar high from the election day rush and want to figure out how to make a difference in your town, definitely join us for that. That will be on 7 o'clock at Zoom, via Zoom. We are asking people to pre-register beforehand just so we have a count of how many people will be there so we can divide up the discussion groups appropriately. So if you go to the town website, there is a button just at the bottom for Vision 2030 with a link to do that. The 4 topics we'll be focusing on for this session will be the cultural and historic landscape, public facilities and infrastructure, adapting to environmental challenges, and a lot of that pre-work, I want to acknowledge the work that was done for the hazard mitigation plan and for the Envision Wakefield Resilient process that really previewed a lot of that work. And finally, advancing business districts and opportunities. So please join us for that. We had about 100 people participate in the first forum, and it would be great if we have similar turnout for this one. Like the first forum, we'll be following up with a survey that will be out for about 3 weeks. So if for whatever reason you can't make it, and even if you can, please make sure to fill out that survey as well. Just also want to echo the reminder to folks about Election Day. Please make sure to go out and vote. And just a thank you in advance to Town Clerk Betsy Sheeran, her staff, as well as all of the poll workers that volunteer their day to help out there. It's a huge amount of effort every year. I think, you know, in a time of a pandemic, everything is more effort this year. And so just want to thank them in advance for what I'm sure will be a smooth and incredibly efficient election. And then finally, just again, a reminder to please participate in town meeting, and a thank you again to Town Moderator Bill Carroll, Steve's team, and everyone at WCAT for helping to make that happen.
Thank you, Jonathan. Maureen.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of repetition of what everyone said, but Paul, we will miss you. Thank you for your being a great colleague over the years. And thank you for your year as chair, and Julie as vice chair also. Just want to add that. A reminder, yes, voting tomorrow in town meeting on May 8th. So hope to see everyone in the next couple of weeks. Just a public health announcement, as we didn't have Ruth, Director Clay here. Everyone 16 and older in Massachusetts can get their shots. So please register. And if you need help, call the Board of Health, or call a counselor, call one of us. We will help you find somewhere to get that shot. And then just to follow up on the theme of sidewalks, as spring has started to come, and kids are walking to school, and we're getting back in our cars and are driving. There was a little campaign last week about just being mindful of people using the crosswalks. There's been an increase of accidents, nothing fatal, but still accidents. And so just to be mindful as you're driving around, and for people to use those crosswalks, and be aware. And thank you to Lieutenant Anderson and Jen McDonald for kind of working on that campaign last week.
Thanks, Maureen. Steve, anything?
Yeah, a couple of very quick things. I was really hoping that Paul would be here tonight. But I do want to thank Paul, and I've worked with Paul for a long time, 9 years, and I want to thank him really for his passion and service. And I think the best thing that can be said for a counselor or for any of us is that, you know, we left Wakefield a little bit better than when we found it, and Paul certainly did that. So I do want to make sure that I got to thank him. A couple of very quick, exciting things. The Adirondack chairs for the library have been painted by the Boys and Girls Club, and you may see them as early as tomorrow on the plaza there. The art students are painting some of the barriers downtown this week. So you may see them. We're buying them lunch. So if you see them down there painting, you can go say hello. The high school project will be in front of the School Building Authority on May 3rd at 2:50 in the afternoon, Monday, May 3rd. That is for the SBA to approve the selection of our owner's project manager. That is a Zoom meeting. If anybody wants to attend, please let me know. The town, us as town officials have very little to do at that meeting. They will actually just ask questions of the OPM. And they'll make a slide presentation. So you can certainly see that. And on the HRC document, if anybody can send me their comments, I can put together a, a colored one out back to everybody so you can see all the changes. And the earlier the better to have you have more time to look at it. And that's it, Madam Chair.
Great, thanks, Steve. I also want to add my thanks to Paul, having sat with him for 8 years. And certainly his dedication and passion is something that I will, and friendship, I will miss. And, you know, as we go into the election, I can't think of a better and more supportive and competent colleague than my chair, Julie Galvin. As folks are going to the polls tomorrow, just really be thoughtful of who you're voting for. And very briefly, I really hope we can move together as a community after the election. It has been quite ripped apart a little bit. And I think, you know, I'll blame some of it on the pandemic and Zoom. People get a little, if you don't meet and talk to each other, it's really easy to demonize the other side. And I think that, you know, it's really easy for anti-logo people to say all pro-logo people are racists. Are there some in the group? I am absolutely sure. Are there a lot? Probably not. Are they thoughtful? Yes. It's really easy for the pro-logo people, and we've seen it, to demonize the anti-logo people as not belonging here and trying to change Wakefield and move Wakefield in a different direction. Is that true? I would say no. You know, in similar to what was happening in the summer, you can be a Black Lives Matter supporter and support law enforcement. I mean, I know you can. I'm one of them. And I really think we just need to start talking to each other. I'll never forget when Phyllis Hull joined the town council. I could not, the idea of Phyllis, I did not like, because I only knew her from the letters she wrote in the item. And then I sat next to her, and I still never voted with her, but I found her to be lovely and kind and compassionate, and I got to know her. Were we always going to be on the same page? Absolutely not. Were there good things about her? Yes. There's good things about all of us. So I really hope we come back to that. And I had, when I was chair, I would really wanted to strongly come back to the tradition of town council, you know, getting together, not to talk about anything, but maybe to share a little beverage of choice and just talk to each other. I think all committees in the town at large could do that. So I really hope we move together as a community. We're too good a community not to do that. So with that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
There you go, people. Moved by Jonathan, seconded by Ed. Whoever's chair next, you got to assign this. It'll go much better. A roll call vote to close it out. Julie.
Yes.
Jonathan.
Yes.
Ed.
Aye.
Maureen.
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you all. Thank you, WCAT, Tom and Steve, and Sherry, as always. Have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.